Hello everybody and welcome to the West Ham Way YouTube channel. You already know who I am. It's a late one, but I promise I will get it out and I will get it out. It's the predicted 11 and score prediction for the Leeds United game on Friday night. And obviously we would have been massively disappointed with that Manchester United result. I thought we were dominant, or at least in control for 60 minutes. And I thought Manchester United changed the game, dealt with our press incredibly well, brought on Bruno to pick up areas in the midfield, and obviously Rashford really had the pace in behind. And we were a little bit too risky. And I think against Leeds, we're going to see a team that can press us, a team that can push us back, a team that can try and get in behind and create overloads in our box. And we've got to be defensively disciplined. I think Leeds is a tough test, but like I've always said, there are definite avenues for us to go and beat them and press them back. I think the midfield battle will be really interesting between Klich, Phillips, Soucek and Rice as well. But I think I'm looking particularly up front with the likes of Jarrod Bowen, possibly Ben Rama. I say every week I hope he starts, but he probably won't now. But particularly with that pacing behind and looking to try and exploit Leeds' centre-backs who do get split up. This man-marking system that they try and employ, and when they come to a bit of a central back four, means that there are spaces in wide areas that West Ham can exploit. It does mean we can use mobility to get in behind. But shut up, Corey. Let's get on with it. Let's get into the Leeds United lineup and who I think will start for them. In goal, Melier. Fantastic goalkeeper. Really impressed with him actually since he's come up to the Premier League. Fantastic shot stopping. Made a number of good saves the other week against Chelsea despite losing the game. And I think he's been a real gem for them. I'm not too sure on the history of him. I know he's come up from the Championship, but he looks very composed. Fantastic shot stopper, as I've said. Possibly weak area is the trying to play out from the back. I know that is part of Bielsa's play, and that if West Ham wanted to press high, maybe we could exploit that. But I don't think you can really look at that as a negative for the young man. I think he's been fantastic in goal, and it'll be a test for West Ham to try and get past him. But I do think we can use set pieces to our advantage, and I do believe we can put him under pressure and put pressure on that Leeds back four. Now, right back, Luke Ayling. Again, been quite impressed with him. He'll look to get forward at times. He'll look to come in a little bit central, particularly with that back four. He'll surrender width in areas and allow the likes of Raphinha to come back and cover in those wide areas to create that kind of central low block, particularly when we've got possession. And he will get forward at times. He can make overlapping runs. He can make underlapping runs. Both of the fullbacks for Leeds, whether it's Alioski, Dallas, or whether it's Elland, will look to push up, will look to create pressure on that West Ham back five and create overloads and chances, and now allow the likes of Raphinha to come in central, Jack Harrison to come in central and try and get in behind and create something for Patrick Bamford. But I think where possibly his weakness lies, again, is where he sacrifices the width that West Ham can look to exploit. And particularly in recent weeks, I've seen Leeds struggle from deliveries. Chelsea is a perfect example. I've seen that from multiple occasions as well, from set pieces, from open play. They struggle with mobility in behind. And I'll be looking at the likes of Sebastian Haller, who's not the quickest, but does have decent striking movement to really exploit that and try and get a chance off. But nonetheless, a good right back will get forward, is offensive, as most of this Leeds team are, to be honest. Right, now, let's get into the centre-backs. Newly promoted is Diego Llorente. Now, obviously, they've signed him from Spain. He's a Spanish international as well. I haven't seen too much of him, I'm honest. I think a lot of us thought that Robin Koch would start in this game. He won't. He's undergone knee surgery. He'll play on that right-hand side of the two centre-backs. And interestingly enough, with both centre-backs, and what I find is obviously part of Bielsa's philosophy and something that he believes in, is this idea of pressing the man and man marking. I've seen Luke Ayling come across the cover a man and allow the wide man to cover his position. I've seen both centre-backs try and press and cover the position of the man that's on the ball. And of course, it relinquishes space. And this system relies on Bielsa's team to work hard, to close the space, to close the men. And any mistakes or any tiring of that press means that both those two centre-backs can be split apart. From what I've seen of Llorente, probably the more mobile of the two, but has been exploited, particularly by the mobility of Chelsea, the pace that they can get in behind. West Ham don't really have that same threat in terms of Sebastian Haller. I will get onto Haller's position and where he can benefit in this game, but certainly we can look to try and exploit them, because even when you've got someone like Llorente, who is not necessarily immobile, is actually quite decent, the way that back four works means that West Ham can create chances and create space. I'm more interested in this man as a potential target area for West Ham to look at, and it is, of course, Liam Cooper, their captain. Obviously, I've spent a number of episodes on All Leeds TV talking about Cooper and obviously the rise of him from League One and how he's become captain. We can get at Liam Cooper, particularly at that left side of that centre-back. Jarrod Bowen, if we can get him to come central, he'll find space in the wide areas. Maybe he'll prefer it there. If he wants to cut in, He can look to try and get in behind Cooper, particularly on the transition. He will struggle with that. I think West Ham, particularly with that front three, need to demonstrate some sort of, movement and runners and Allaire possibly. If the likes of Jarrod Bowen can draw the defence out, particularly draw the likes of Alioski or Dallas out from that left-back position, Cooper is under pressure, therefore, to either sit back or go and try and challenge for the ball. And I think when you've got movement, like Allaire can demonstrate, possibly he could get isolated and he could get done as well. But it's mostly really a functional thing with this Leeds defence. It isn't necessarily individuals. He's a little less mobile than, of course, Llorente. But I think it's just more the way they try and meet the man and put almost that man-marking system and man-marking press that West Ham with numbers can exploit and use wide areas to allow particularly those front three, to come central, to create space and ultimately to create chances. Now, this man, and I've spoke to Oscar obviously earlier tonight, Alioski could start, but what apparently is the instance that someone where you've got Stuart Dallas that's a right-footed left back in essence will look to try and deal with an inverted winger. So we could see Dallas there. I know Dallas has been deployed in almost like a bit of a holding midfield role recently for Leeds, but certainly Alioski has started previously. Again, very, very similar role to Luke Ayling. Alioski is very, very advanced, as is Ayling, and they try to create overloads and put pressure on opposition defences. They don't get wide. And this is the thing, I've seen, it's not a sort of fundamental part of their play to use the width and get crosses in. It's to create pressure in the box, to create overloads, to make it difficult for teams, even with low blocks, to be defensively disciplined. And Alioski will push up. He'll look to put pressure. And he'll look to allow the likes of Jack Harrison to come a little bit central and create a little bit more width. But I've seen him recently sit on the edge of that box and try and just keep the pressure on opposition defence. Alioski will do that. Both of the fullbacks will do that. The centre-backs less so. But even so, Leeds as a team press. And what you'll see from their midfield is the press is a massive part of their way of chance creation and trying to score goals. Now, the midfield is always interesting, as it is with every single team. Leeds will employ a three-man midfield, I'm led to believe. And from what I've seen, this will be the system. Now, obviously, I've mentioned Stuart Dallas potentially could come to left-back. But what I've seen from him in recent weeks is him playing a holding role. Now, when you look at it on the outset, you think that Kalvin Phillips is the pivot in this system. Dallas isn't really a natural pivot. What he provides is a little bit of solidity just in front of those back two and a bit of protection. Positionally, I don't think he's as good as Kalvin Phillips. I think Kalvin Phillips is fantastic at that role. He's able to read danger very, very well and break it up and sometimes slot between the two centre-backs to create an extra little bit of protection. Obviously, Dallas's instinct isn't naturally to do that, but this is a trademark of a Bielsa side, playing players that can play multiple different positions in different systems. So I expect Dallas to be there. Again, from what I've seen him a left back, he's athletic, he can get forward, he can bomb on. He will actually probably look to keep the width a little bit more than the likes of Alioski if he does play at left back position. But from what I've seen of him, he can play midfield. Probably not to the same level, not with the same level of defensive intelligence as someone like Kalvin Phillips, but just providing a foil and allowing Bielsa to use Phillips in a more offensive way and get the most out of his passing range. So listen, it'll be interesting to see what happens in that midfield role and whether he chooses possibly to play Phillips there. He could do that to counter West Ham's possible transition. Now, this man, right? This is the guy that pretty much most West Ham fans talk about, and that conflict between Declan Rice and Kalvin Phillips continually ensues. But let's get into it. Let's get into what he has to offer within this Leeds side. So basically, from what I've seen of Kalvin Phillips, defensively, he's incredibly intelligent. He knows where the spaces are. He looks to, like I've said, sometimes slot between the two centre-backs, which, as I've said, because of the man-marking system where they look to press, they will get exploited. And having someone like Phillips in there, typically in that defensive midfield role, gives him the solidity. In a more of a number 8 role that I've seen, he'll look to press on. We saw, particularly for Patrick Bamford's goal against Chelsea, that he can utilise his passing range. What's interesting about the 2 8s for Leeds, they look to link up play down the wings to create spaces and overloads in certain areas. And what you'll see is Phillips naturally come out to the right. You see Klich come out to the left at times to try and create passes and passages of play that open up teams. Now, in a midfield, possibly a packed midfield, this would work. The ability to move the ball quickly, to use the width in order to do so, and then to transition it back into the centre is a way of getting service into Patrick Bamford. And obviously the 2 8s putting pressure and trying to create second balls and chances. Now, Against West Ham will relinquish possession in midfield. They can't press them. I mean, we've done it previously. Obviously, we've seen, Rice and Soucek press, but it's really more of a collective press. And I think if the midfield, in terms of that midfield battle, Phillips and Klich won't be pressed in areas wide where they look to link up play. Primarily when they come central and Leeds try and create overloads in the box. Possibly it's something for the likes of Declan Rice and Soucek to occupy. For me, this is just a personal opinion, I think Kalvin Phillips is 10 times better in that defensive midfield role, not only in terms of the defensive solidity that he offers, the passing range, the ability to switch the ball, the ability to try and create width out of play, that an occasion that if Leeds can't break down a team or possibly their eights aren't going to pick the ball up and transition quickly, that switch ball from Phillips allows them to do so and allows them to start that press. Again, I feel like even in that defensive role, that switch ball against West Ham with a back five, possibly reverting to that 5-4-1, it's going to be tricky for Phillips to pull off. It's not going to be as effective, but I expect to see him in an 8 role as we've seen him in the last game against Chelsea. He'll get more freedom than he did against Chelsea, no doubt. So I expect him to be trying to pepper balls into the box, link up play a little bit more, hit a switch ball occasionally, but ultimately positionally try and put pressure on, particularly those West Ham defensive pivots. This man, for me, is a hugely underrated player, Matuesz Klich. I've been incredibly impressed from what I've seen with him at Leeds. He plays as an 8, he suits an 8. What you'll see, particularly when Leeds have got possession, particularly in that final third, both him and Phillips almost play a 10 role. The difference between Klich and Phillips is that Klich has this ability to play through the lines. He's naturally an 8. He'll go to pick up the ball on either flank, possibly in this instance on the left, try and move play along, try and break down the midfield. West Ham, in all likelihood, will sit a little bit deeper. He could have a lot more of the possession than he would expect, and maybe West Ham will look for Leeds to try and put pressure on us and we can soak it up and hit him on the transition. But for me, Klich is a very dangerous player, and I look at him particularly with the link up to the forward man. He can hit shots from outside the box. We've seen that against Fulham. Equally, he can look to link up play with the likes of Patrick Bamford and utilise his mobility. The West Ham, on occasion, particularly on that right-hand side with Balbuena, can struggle with. So offensively, for me, Klich is a little bit more dangerous. They're both equally mobile. They both put pressure on West Ham's box. Maybe, possibly Leeds suffer from a lack of a number 10. I am concerned if they look to play Phillips in a pivot role and then they bring on Rodrigo, who's someone with that unpredictability and that ability to drive past players that could force West Ham's 2 defensive pivots out of position. It is a question, but that battle of that midfield will be interesting, and it'll be interesting to see how the likes of Rice and Soucek deal with Klich, whether they sit deep or whether they try and press them, win the ball high up in terms of that turnover on the pitch, and then allows West Ham to get bodies forward and utilise the spacing behind, which they have, which, to be fair to Leeds, they do give up a lot of spacing behind when they press. And I've seen it from a number of teams, Chelsea, even Arsenal at one point with their breakaway in that 0-0. Bellerin was finding pockets in that spacing behind Phillips and Klich. So listen, there are opportunities for West Ham to counter Leeds 100%, and I expect that particularly from the midfield. Now, onto the wide areas, and their forward 3 and the way they work positionally is very interesting. I expect Jack Harrison to start in this game. I also expect Raphinha to start on the right-hand side. Both of them will come central in a counter-attack. They don't hold the width as much, particularly when they're moving forward. They allow the fullbacks to get on. They allow them to come central, and they look to work together and interchange. And that's what's been the most interesting thing. We can talk about a 4-3-3, typically, that creates width. Now, I think Leeds are happy to create overloads and pressure. And Jack Harrison and Raphinha, particularly Raphinha with the mobility and the pace that he can get in behind with, they look to come central and try and stretch defences. Against Aston Villa, I know both of them, I don't think Harrison or Raphinha played in that game, but in certain games, and particularly with that Leeds system, whether it's Costa, possibly playing Alioski in a more advanced role, however they want to play this game, they will try and push their 2 wide men central. It does mean that in transition, they can pick the ball up, and the pace at which they can work amongst each other and break down defences that aren't in a proper defensive shape, that aren't in a low block, is at ease. They're close to each other. They're not relying purely on delivery to get into the likes of Patrick Bamford. They can get close to him and they can create chances. I expect West Ham, as I've said, to relinquish a lot of the ball for Leeds United to have it, to put pressure on us. And I expect the likes of Raphinha, Jack Harrison to come central, possibly just in front of Declan Rice and Soucek. And it is going to be a tough task for both of those pivots. How can they deal with both the pressure of Phillips and Klich, as well as the likes of Raphinha and Harrison coming central to try and link up play with Patrick Bamford? The opportunities for them to get in behind are limited just because of the way that the system works. They rely on West Ham pressing and leaving space in behind. But nonetheless, it means that West Ham can't afford to be reckless in the press, to push up. We have to push up and be clinical when we do so, because I think Leeds' ability to hurt teams, particularly with the counter-attack and the players that they use to transition with the ball, means that they're dangerous. And I do worry. Raphinha has also shown in previous games, particularly against Everton, coming central for that goal and hitting it across Pickford. That's what they can do from distance. I think probably the only criticism of Leeds is how they break teams down when they play that low block. It's frustrating for them. It isn't the way they play. And it makes it difficult for them to create clear-cut chances. I've seen them create chances. Naturally, they will through the overload and the pressure, but it's about creating clear-cut chances and being clinical. I want to talk about this man because I really, really rate this player, Patrick Bamford. And I know Leeds fans probably watching this, I've heard there's a bit of back and forth with him as a player and whether he'll work in the Premier League. He's shown it. And I think the reason behind this is his mobility. His mobility and his natural striker movement to get him behind is the reason why Leeds can create clear-cut chances and score from them. And I think in games, the likes of Crystal Palace, even in the offside goal, the ability to move in behind a static defence is crucial in this Leeds side, particularly in the transition. They need to work with the player up front in order to create a chance for them to score if they cannot get through themselves. And Bamford, there's a lot of pressure on Patrick Bamford to get those goals. And to be fair to him, he does. What he does also cleverly, because Leeds are so used to creating overloads and pressure on opposition defences, he peels off defenders and he'll find space just in that box to get a shot off. And I think that's what West Ham have to be careful about. If Leeds do put enough pressure on us, and particularly from deliveries, the second ball, Patrick Bamford has that ability to find that space and get a shot off. Equally, if he can get in behind the likes of Balbuena or Bonner or Creswell, particularly from a Klich ball that I expect him to play, it's going to be frustrating for West Ham, and it could lead to a goal. And I think when I look at West Ham's defensive shape, I think it's relatively straightforward, the game plan. We need to be defensive. We need to put a low block. But there is always that danger with a striker that's got that ability to move in behind. And we've seen West Ham in the past have struggled with that, particularly down that right-hand side. The side, ultimately, where the likes of Bamford like to peel off to, and particularly Klich. I worry about that partnership. And I think West Ham, the defensive midfielders, need to be incredibly solid and look to really nullify the likes of Klich, because I think Bamford is their greatest chance of scoring a goal. When we talk about them on the transition, it's a completely different element because they will push up, create chances, and the speed at which they can do it means that they can score either from the midfield or from the sort of inverted wingers. But in terms of them having the ball and trying to break us down, it really comes down to Bamford. There's a lot of pressure on him to score, so we can really restrict the avenues in which Leeds can hurt us. But nonetheless, a fantastic side in terms of the way they want to play football, but it does leave space in behind. What I will say as well about this Leeds team is when they press, particularly with the 2-8s and Dallas, who isn't really a natural pivot, they'll create enough space just in front of that back two. And if you don't have a natural pivot like a Phillips who's sitting in with Cooper and Llorente, someone like Haller, he doesn't need pace in order to get in behind. He will find that space. And what we've seen from Haller in recent weeks is the fact that his awareness of the players around him means that he could start creating chances. He can score from the edge of the box. We see that against Sheffield United. And I think Leeds will relinquish that in the press. They have to. So, if West Ham can break the press, get out from the pressure, I think Haller will have more space than we expect him to. And I don't think that his pace or his lack of is going to hurt him. I think, if anything, we saw, particularly with Chelsea and Giroud, he found space just in front of that back two. And particularly with his movement, which they struggled to pick up, he still scored a goal. And I think this is a very, very similar game for the likes of Haller. He will get chances. He will be able to drop possibly a little bit deeper. And he will be able to create for the likes of Jarrod Bowen or Pablo Fornals. And it does also give an avenue to the likes of Fornals, who likes to come a bit central. If Ben Rama comes on later in the game to come central, Phillips and Dallas and the midfield push up too high. And I think where that is back two split and there's too many runners on Leeds, will create space. And I think if West Ham particularly if they put the wing backs up as well, and you've got, three forward men that are going to come central and try and pick up a bit of mobility in behind and really stretch Leeds, will create clear-cut chances 100%. But I will get to it in my West Ham predicted 11. I always put this together and I always think, okay, what do I need to do? It's going to be the same. But I can talk about it and how I think will be impacted by Leeds' style of play 100%. So, Fabianski in goal. Again, fantastic performance from him. He's been consistent this season, probably the most consistent season since his injury away at Bournemouth last season. Great shot stopper. Will be commanding in the box. I can't, from what I've seen of Leeds, the delivery isn't really prominent. I don't think there's anything that's going to be that's going to trouble Fabianski too much in this game. I would be concerned for Bamford and his movement. I think Fabianski may have to come out quite quickly in order to nullify that. But I just feel like maybe that West Ham defensive system of that back five is going to make it really frustrating for Leeds. And I don't think deliveries is something that Fabianski is going to have to contend with. I think he's going to have to rely on his defenders in particular to deal with the pressure. And I think offensively as well, the defence have got a lot to play and a role to play in. And I think beating the press and doing so through quality delivery into the forward men and the wide and the wing backs is what's going to hurt Leeds, particularly on that counter. Now, left wing back, Arthur Masuaku. Listen, I really rate Arthur Masuaku, to be honest. I think this is a perfect game for him. I think for the past few games, I think we've seen our wing backs maybe have to tuck in a little bit. Namely Sheffield United, Aston Villa. When we reverted to that back four, you saw the likes of Ben Rahman was creating that back five, and I think there's been a lot of defensive onus on West Ham's wing backs in these past few games, and I think it's not to say that Leeds can't hurt us from wide areas. But the fact that they relinquish a lot of those wide areas and, they allow their wingers to come a little bit central and the fullbacks to push up means that they're not going to try and get in behind Arthur Masuaku. I think what we've seen previously as well is that switch ball from teams hurts us if we press too high. And I just think if Leeds have got a lot of possession, they won't look to possibly play in behind in wide areas and they'll look to come a little bit central or put deliveries in. So I think Arthur's role in this side is, again, he has to be in the low block initially and he has to look after that kind of the likes of Raphinha down that side. And he's got to beat the press as well of someone like a Luke Elland. But certainly I think once he's broken that press and if he can bring it out, and we know his qualities in terms of his dribbling and his pace, I think he carries the ball. And unfortunately for Leeds, I don't think there's enough. There aren't enough men, particularly in the transition, to cover that. Even with Stuart Dallas possibly sitting a little bit in a pivot role. Again, you're asking a lot of the Leeds midfield, a lot of the Leeds wingers as well to track back. And it isn't criticism in terms of their fitness, but Arthur Masuaku can bring that ball out and hurt Leeds in wide areas. They vacate it. They vacate the space, particularly in that when they've not got the ball, and particularly when they're in the defensive shape, because they believe that if they create almost a central unit and a low block, they can prevent teams from scoring. But Chelsea showed that if you use the width against them and put in decent quality deliveries across the box, they struggle to deal with those. And I just back West Ham, particularly with the forward three and the movement of Elland, to exploit that. Getting on to the other centre-back, and obviously he's been a revelation this season, is Aaron Cresswell. Again, I think Aaron Cresswell has got a real job on his hands here. And the reason why I say this is you've got someone like Raphinha, who can hit a ball from distance, can try and take you on, can beat a man, has got pace. And I don't think this is a game for Aaron Cresswell where we see him almost in that inverted run and trying to play into the forward men. I'm not convinced Aaron Cresswell is going to have too much space to move into. It is going to be a defensive demonstration from the likes of him. He's going to have to be disciplined. I always say this, but particularly in this game, we cannot afford to give Leeds' forward men any space in behind, because it allows the likes of Patrick Bamford to get a run on. And if they can get some sort of delivery within the box to Bamford, his ability to peel off into space means that he's a massive threat. And Cresswell has to be disciplined, and more so than ever. I think when we look at the transition and bringing the ball up, it has to be from the wing backs, because the areas that Leeds are willing to let go in wide places means that Cresswell's role isn't really important offensively, but defensively, of course, he has to be switched on. Now, in terms of the centre-back, huge game, as always for Angelo Ogbonna. Again, a rocket centre-back, an incredible leader. Again, I can't really criticise our centre-backs against Manchester United. I thought for the first 45 minutes, our press was superb. We won the ball in high areas. I don't expect that to be like against Leeds, because I think the threat of Patrick Bamford and the quality of Klich in terms of that final third means that they can hurt us. But I look at Angelo Ogbonna and I think aerially, he's dominant. I think Leeds struggle aerially as well. It's not as a test so much in that area. It's across the floor. It's the pressure. It's the discipline. Again, against Leeds, they'll press us. They'll try and hurt us. And I think, listen, West Ham will be, those three centre-backs will be protected by the likes of Declan Rice and Soucek. But I'm not too sure how much possession David Moyes wants to concede to Leeds. Whether he thinks they can hurt us if they have too much of the ball. And if for whatever reason the back three are exposed, I expect Ogbonna to pick them up, to pick the move of Bamford and to deal with him and pass him on to the likes of Balbuena and really push him out of our box, because Bamford can't hurt us as much as we think he can if he's outside the box. He's a fantastic striker with great movement, but outside the areas, he isn't a player that's going to peel off and try and drag you out of position. He isn't that type of player. So I think if we can restrict him to movement outside the box, particularly with the likes of Bonner, you take away one of Leeds' biggest goals threat. And you can see that from the goals they've scored this season. Balbuena on the right-hand side, quick note as well with Balbuena, incredibly impressive against Manchester United. I know people were saying that, I think it's for Rashford's goal from the Mata pass, that he was at fault possibly for pressing too high. I think the team were at fault for pressing too high against Manchester United. I think it was an overzealous tactic. But I think in terms of that first half, the criticism has always been he's too aggressive. And he doesn't win the ball and he can get beaten behind. I think against Manchester United, he found that balance of winning the ball in the midfield areas, and that turnover and that ability for West Ham to get forward further up the pitch than we had previously means that the transition was more effective and we created chances. And I think he's improving in that area. It's encouraging for me. I would have said that Bamford and that sort of link up with Klich would have been a real issue. I would hope that he can deal with it. I wouldn't expect this type of game. This isn't the Manchester United game. Because the press isn't so intense. They press as a team, but not using their rates to try and pin us back. And I would expect Declan Rice and Soucek to sort those midfielders out, to prevent the service getting into Bamford, and Balbuena's role to be more disciplined. And I think, aerially he's fantastic still. I think he's shown as well that his distribution is improving. But it's a defensive display for me from Fabian Balbuena. He needs to be disciplined. And I think he's shown improvement week on week. And I'm encouraged by his performance. This man, I feel, will be absolutely crucial in this game, completely. And I think, and it goes to the same for Arthur Masuaku. The ability for those two wing backs to get forward in the spaces that Leeds don't have. And by the way, if West Ham do press Leeds United, and I don't expect us to do it, but Moyes does have a habit of doing it within the first 10 minutes, Leeds, even with the likes of someone like a Jack Harrison playing almost in that back five, or Raphinha coming back to cover and allowing Alioski and Elland to possibly come a little bit more central and deal, West Ham don't have the central threat as much as possibly Leeds think we do. And I think if they're willing to allow their wingers to come in a little bit and vacate spaces in the real wide areas where Soufal benefits from, he's going to have the opportunity to get deliveries into the box. And we saw against Chelsea, Reece James, for Giroud, they struggle to deal with that movement in the box. And I just look at Soufal and Masuaku in this game as having the chance and the space to create. And I think Moyes has to take that risk. I think he has to take that risk. I think the game plan is simple from a defensive aspect. Leeds will try and play in central areas, use Bamford's movement slightly, put pressure on us, win second balls. I think West Ham have got enough of a low block and a disciplined system, particularly with Rice and Soucek sitting, that we can deal with that. But we need to use Arthur Masuaku and Soufal in the wide areas to transition and carry the ball. We will not win that midfield battle. It will be tough for Rice and Soucek to come out. If we risk pushing them out to try and win the ball, and again try and transition with it into the likes of Sebastian Haller, ultimately we'll leave space in behind, and it will be the same situation as Manchester United. Even though Leeds don't have a natural number 10, if they bring on Rodrigo, if they've got Klich, if they've got Kalvin Phillips that can push into more advanced areas, they'll hurt us. You can concede possession to Leeds, but you have to have that defensive shape. And I would hope that West Ham have that defensive shape in the central areas and use the wide men to hurt them, and particularly offensively. And it's a massive game for them. I'm interested to see what they can do. And I back them in terms of their delivery. We've seen that in recent weeks. And I think this makes the job of Sebastian Haller easier. He's got to get into the box. He's got to use his striking movement and get beyond the Leeds United defenders, particularly when they're out of position. And I think if West Ham, can concede and allow Haller to play a little bit more in an advanced role, which of course naturally puts pressure on our midfielders and our defenders. But I feel like by doing that and pushing Haller further up the pitch, we're going to get more from him. And listen, I think we can really hurt. If we push numbers forward in the wing-back areas and the three forwards, it'll be too much for that Leeds defence, particularly in the transitions, because they will have to try and man mark, and there'll be too many men for them to do so, and spaces will open up. Now I've spoken enough about the wing-back system. Let's talk about the midfielders. Declan Rice. This is a big game for Declan, of course, as it always seems to be. For me, it's a disciplined game, and I think we've got to see that defensive midfield role. I'm interested to see how Moyes utilises him, whether he wants to press Kalvin Phillips, or whether he wants to sit in. For me, I'm not convinced that Rice and Soucek's ability to get forward and transition into the midfield is as easy as I would like. Sometimes I look for them to carry the ball out. I think in this game, they're going to have pressure on them from the 2-8s. You've got Dallas in behind as well. that sort of controls that press as well, it's going to be tough for them to get out. I think in this game we need to look for them to be disciplined, positionally as well. I can't see them being too advanced. At the same time, I wouldn't want to step off someone like Klich or Phillips because of their passing ability as well. But for me, the role of that box-to-box midfielder that we've possibly seen from Declan Rice in the past, and obviously of Tomas Soucek, we won't see in this game. They have to be defensive-minded. They have to really obey that low block, make it hard for Leeds to play through us. And I think, listen, you restrict the chances and the overload becomes less risky, by sort of allowing them to vacate and go and press the likes of Kalvin, Phillips and Klich. You create spaces in behind. And I'm concerned that space that we vacate, if Phillips or Klich can get beyond, they'll create chances. So again, a disciplined game for both of them. And I think the only difference between Rice and Soucek in this instance is that Soucek's ability within the box can hurt Leeds badly, really badly. And I'm not sure whether West Ham want to play this risky strategy. It could be something that we look at. Playing him as a late runner into the box will hurt Leeds incredibly so. Because like I've said, that system of trying to track a man across those back four and pick them off, a late runner like Soucek is difficult to pick up. And I think there will be space vacated between the two centre-backs. When Leeds play out from the back, they use both centre-backs and they spread. When they're actually trying to play in a defensive shape and one of them goes and presses, they press the ball. They don't press the space. And the space will open up for West Ham. If West Ham are chasing a goal, I expect someone like Soucek to push forward. But if West Ham don't need to, if West Ham are soaking up the pressure and we can hit them and use the wide areas to hurt Leeds, get delivery into the front men, there's no need for Declan Rice or Tomas Soucek to play advanced in this game. It's a cautious game to play, and it's a disciplined one, and I expect them to do so. I also expect Tomas Soucek as well to hurt Leeds from set pieces. We saw against Manchester United. I'll get onto Leeds United. Their ability to deal with set pieces is incredibly bad. I mean, they can't deal with the set piece. They can't deal with the movement from deliveries, from set pieces in the near post, in the middle of the box, towards the back stick as well. They struggled to deal with it. In the last game, Chelsea out of 8 crosses successfully, got a shot on target from 7 of those. That's something for West Ham to absolutely utilise. But I will look more particularly from set pieces. But listen, I mean, if Soucek can create a late run into the box, and obviously we can get service off Sebastian Haller, don't be surprised if Soucek can get across those defenders, find space, and nick a goal. Now, here we go. The contentious point. It's almost like bingo, really, at this point. So if you've got it, let me know for the front three. I'm going to go with this, and it's conservative to a degree. It isn't something that I necessarily agree with, but I think will happen. Again, Pablo Fornals will play on that left-hand side of the front three. I haven't really been impressed with Fornals, if I'm perfectly honest, for probably about 4 weeks now. And I really, listen, his end quality in terms of that final third is really good. His work rate's fantastic. His defensive work rate is important. I feel that Moyes is going to use him particularly on that left-hand side to deal with the likes of Elland, and the likes of Raphinha that will push on. And I think Moyes will be able to get behind that decision. And certainly I can see the rationale behind it. I'm interested to see where we see Pablo Fornals in an offensive position. There's no doubt for me that if Benrahma played in this game, that his ability and his movement in behind as well as his natural pace would hurt Leeds and their back four. There's no doubt. I think Fornals is an option to use for his defensive awareness and to stop Leeds' threat. I mean, possibly I can see it working as almost him playing that defensive role and trying to push back the likes of Elland and preventing him from carrying the ball too far, and then possibly the likes of Arthur Masuaku creating an overlap. That is something that I would look for West Ham to utilise. This game might suit Pablo Fornals in offensive areas. I can see that Leeds midfield pushing higher. I can see them vacating space just in front of that back four. And then if he's got the likes of Arthur Masuaku that push it on, he has got the support near him as well. He'll have the likes of Haller being able to work through the space of the two centre-backs. Offensively, on paper, you'd say Benrahma for the transition, but if you've got the likes of Masuaku and Soufal that can carry the ball into the wide areas with pace, I personally think Fornals will find it. And I think if we can get him in an offensive third, I think we'll see his quality. And even if we don't, I think his ability to supply Masuaku or Sebastian Haller will contribute towards a chance creation or a goal. So I think even though I've been critical of him in recent weeks, possibly for this system he works, and I'm interested to see what Moyes does with him. I'm interested to see what he does in the areas, because I think on paper I thought that Phillips would play a defensive role. If Phillips plays, by the way, in a pivot role, I think it'd be incredibly tough for him because of the defensive work rate and the awareness of Kalvin Phillips. And I'm not sure how much joy both Haller or Fornals will get in those final third positions. But certainly without that, in the absence of it, I think Fornals can still offer something offensively. And I think, listen, when we see him in central areas in the final third, he's at his best. Less so when he's missing obvious goal-scoring opportunities, but certainly in terms of that chance creation in that final third, he's still got it for me. Now, right-hand side, Jarrod Bowen. Listen, like I've said, I think very, very similar to Fornals. He'll be able to come inside because I think Soucek will look to push up. Soucek pushes up, he creates the width, we can create chances from there. Equally on transition, I think Bowen's pace is going to hurt Leeds. I think when they've got the likes of either Alioski or Dallas pushing up, I think even Jack Harrison as well, they'll vacate space on the wings. And I think West Ham can use that, to the advantage. And I think on that right-hand side, with natural pace in Bowen as well as Soucek, I think we can hurt them and get into space and move up very, very quickly and start to create chances. And I think it will start to open up for Sebastian Haller. So, for me, Bowen in this game is going to be incredibly dangerous. I expect him to cut in. I think even if he cuts in, the space in behind the midfield, he's going to have opportunities to get chances on target. He's going to have opportunities to play into the likes of Sebastian Haller. I think this is a game where we see Bowen possibly at his offensive best. And that is a bit of a hyperbolic statement, but I just think maybe the way that Leeds set up their openness as well means that we can hurt them. And I think Jarrod Bowen is the player for me to do that. Again, I expect there to be some sort of work rate element in terms of his defensive duties. But I think if we're in that low block anyway, we're really relying on the likes of Jarrod Bowen or a Pablo Fornals to carry the ball. But equally, they can come central if we create overloads. And I think that's what's going to hurt Leeds, because they're going to have to track nearly five players in a defensive transition when they're out of shape, and it suits West Ham down to the ground. And historically, Leeds, particularly against the likes of Leicester, have struggled with that. And against Palace as well, I think Jordan Ayew's scoreboard has had an opportunity to play through that Leeds defence, and the space that they will leave means that this is a game for the forward men, and they could really benefit, particularly from those wide two in terms of chance creation. And to round it off very, very nicely, Sebastian Haller. Listen, he's obviously going to start because Mikel Antonio's out for a month, or at least out until the 21st of December. For me, I think this is a good game for him. I think always the concern with someone like Sebastian Haller is his pace and his ability to stretch Leeds. Do I think Mikel Antonio could hurt Leeds? Yes. I think he would mean that we could carry the ball from deeper areas and we wouldn't rely on the wide men to do so. I think West Ham will have to rely on the wide men now. But that doesn't mean that Sebastian Haller can't be effective. I think we've seen from the deliveries of the wide men for Chelsea and numerous other teams against Leeds where they concede that ground. As long as the forward has good movement, like a Giroud, like an Haller, they will create chances for themselves. Equally, the space that they create between the two centre-backs without the likes of Kalvin Phillips means that Haller will have chances to get on the ball and create. And we've seen that there's an improved awareness of him in recent games. And I think this would benefit the likes of, a Jarrod Bowen or a Pablo Fornals. What I would like to see from Haller in this game, and what I think we could see for Haller in this game, is Jarrod Bowen and Fornals becoming the creator, and Haller using his movement in the most advanced areas to get onto the end of chances. I think Haller has shown himself to be a good chance creator, a good hold-up man. I think that there's positives of his play that we've seen, but I think we can see more of a striking element in this game. If West Ham press Leeds, particularly on transitions, and use the wide areas, I think he'll get service from deliveries. I think he'll get service particularly from the two wingers coming central. But more important than any of that, I think he'll get space against Leeds. I think if he can get space in behind, he can get space in front. Sebastian Haller will get space. The biggest test for Sebastian Haller is when he can't move. He doesn't have the mobility to get in behind a player. And he also doesn't have the positioning in terms of the player on him to get out of that situation. And I think Leeds will get both. And not to say, Sebastian Haller is going to cause them significant issues or run in behind. Not true. But I think if you look at Chelsea as a case in point, when they win the ball, particularly the high turnover up the pitch, they use their width. Even when they work centrally, the runners off someone like a Timo Werner. Not to compare Timo Werner to Jarrod Bowen, but certainly that ilk of pacing behind the players hurts them because you have to stretch. And if you stretch that Leeds back four, there will be chances for all of the forward three men. And I think we'll get more chances in this game than we expect to, but we have to be clinical. We cannot perform the way we did against Manchester United in terms of missing those opportunities. It's fantastic that West Ham create them. and it shows that the system's working in terms of that press from the forward three, getting men forward, overloading the boxing, and in terms of that quick transition, I think West Ham probably are one of the better in the league at doing it. This is a game for that, but certainly we've got to be clinical. We cannot waste chances against Leeds United. Not because I think that we're going to be hurt by Leeds, particularly if we're in that defensive shape, but I just think it would be really disappointing for West Ham to not use the spaces that will open up, particularly on the counter-attack. One last thing, I probably will say set pieces, if I've not already said. They're weak from the near post. The delivery across hurts them, particularly in transition when they're not in shape. When they are in shape, they'll bring the two wingers back over, as explained, but they still concede, the width. It's an interesting tactic from Bielsa. The thing that I see from Bielsa's side is a philosophy. He wants his teams to play it, and the reason why he uses and gets the midfielders to go into the wings and pick up the ball is so he can play through the spaces. But West Ham here aren't trying to gain the spaces. We're trying to be defensive, which we're actually willing to concede possession in order to hit teams on the counter. And I think this is an opportunity for West Ham to hurt a team with space in behind, and it's up to Leeds to try and break us down. And I expect David Moyes to play that way, and I would be really disappointed if he doesn't play that way. I mean, if he isn't defensive-minded, because I think if you do that against Leeds, the press, the ability to get men forward, they will find space. I'm not saying they'll score, but they'll definitely create goal-scoring opportunities. And I just think it's an unnecessary risk, that West Ham should definitely not look for. So, at the end of a very, very long video, I'll give my score prediction. The score prediction for this game is, I'm going to go, I don't know if I should do it, 2-0 West Ham. I would never have said that before. My initial one was 1-0, being an optimistic West Ham fan. I think the way we play is going to frustrate Leeds. I think if we're defensively disciplined, I think we restrict the chances that they've got. I think their willingness and sort of desire to come in central and try and play the ball through the spaces with the players around them, and the press from the 2-8s means that it suits West Ham. As long as West Ham are defensively disciplined and the position is right, they can't get in behind and hurt us. But listen, like I've said before, particularly against United, conceding the space in midfield, pressing the likes of Phillips and Klich, you'll vacate space in behind, and it's conceding unnecessary opportunities for the opposition. Patrick Bamford isn't a player that's going to hurt us and sort of take the ball out and bring us out of position, but he will get in behind. And if Leeds can find space, particularly in front of that back three, Bamford is still a danger. But I think aerially it suits West Ham, positionally it suits West Ham, it suits the West Ham midfield to sit deep. We'll have to concede a lot of possession, but it does mean the wing-backs have to transition with the ball quickly, get the ball, move it to the forward three, allow the forward three to come central, and the spaces will appear with a sort of fragmented Leeds defence. And I think West Ham can hurt them. We've got to be clinical. I think we'll create chances, and I can see us getting the goal, possibly from a set piece and possibly from open play. But I'm not expecting it to be an exciting game by any stretch of the imagination. I think it'll be a very, very boring game, frustrating for Leeds, and a result for West Ham, and I hope so. But listen, I'm not going to rule Leeds out. If West Ham try and open up, Leeds can hurt us all over the pitch, and they play some fantastic stuff, and I think Bamford's movement will hurt us. But I'm repeating myself, so I will end it now. Thank you so much for listening to the West Ham Way YouTube channel. That's my predicted 11 and score prediction. Tomorrow will be Game Changers. I will get that out, as well as a fan's voice at 8 o'clock live, so get your comments in for then. We'll be previewing the Leeds United game, as well as talking about everything Manchester United VAR and the fact that he couldn't seem to pick out a ball that was that far out. Irrespective. Watch along on Friday as well. We're going to start from 7 o'clock. So you're going to have your pre-match build-up, your lineups, as well as your score predictions from the lads, Charles, Dennis. Just waiting on them to confirm, but of course they'll be there. Then there's a little break, and of course next week is going to be busy. There's going to be fans' voices, Crystal Palace preview, the predicted 11s, and then for the Chelsea game on the following Monday. So stay tuned. If you've got this far or you've skipped to the end, make sure you like the video. Really, really important. Make sure you subscribe to the West Ham Way if you're new. Go check out All Leeds TV. I've just done an opposition preview over there. And until tomorrow, take care.